January 9, 2007, San Francisco. A man in a black turtleneck walks onto a stage and holds up a phone. The crowd erupts. And on the other side of the world, in Finland, executives at Nokia headquarters watch the recording of that keynote and reach a conclusion. Nothing to worry about. That sounds like arrogance. But here's the thing. If you knew what Nokia was holding at that moment, you'd understand why they thought they could afford it. That year, 4 out of every 10 phones sold on Earth were Nokias. The company was worth over $150 billion. It wasn't just a business, it was the backbone of an entire nation's economy. And now, the part almost nobody knows, that touchscreen phone that stunned the world? Nokia had already built one 3 years earlier, which leaves us with a question that should keep every successful person up at night. How does a company that has already touched the future lose to it? Over the next 10 minutes, we're going to find out. To understand how Nokia fell, you first have to understand how it rose. Because if there was one thing this company knew how to do, it was come back from the dead. In 1865, on the banks of a river in Finland, Nokia was born as a paper mill. Over the next century, it made rubber boots, electrical cables, television sets. At one point, it even made toilet paper. Again and again, it amputated its old business and leapt into a new one. Then, in the early 1990s, Finland was hit by a brutal recession, and Nokia made the most audacious bet in its history. It sold off nearly everything and went all in on a product most people considered a niche toy for businessmen: the mobile phone. The bet paid off beyond anyone's imagination. By 1998, Nokia had overtaken Motorola to become the #1 phone maker on the planet. That little startup jingle, that indestructible brick in your pocket, for an entire generation, Nokia wasn't a brand. It was simply what a phone was. A company built on reinventing itself should have been the last company on Earth to fear change. And yet, what happened next was exactly the opposite. Rewind to 2004. Deep inside Nokia, a team of engineers builds a prototype. A large touchscreen. No keyboard. Internet access. A user interface you control by swiping your finger. And alongside it, the team proposes something else, an online store, where users could download software directly onto their phones. A touchscreen phone, plus an app store. Let that sink in. This is 2004, 3 years before the iPhone. 4 years before the App Store existed. Both proposals land on the desks of senior management. And then, they go into a drawer. The reasons all sounded perfectly sensible. Too expensive. The market's unproven. And then there was the real concern, the one underneath the others. If this new device succeeded, the first thing it would destroy was Nokia's own best-selling keypad phones. To protect today's revenue, they shelved tomorrow. And here's what makes this moment so chilling. At the time, nothing happened. The numbers stayed beautiful. Sales stayed #1. That's the cruelest thing about this kind of crisis. It never knocks, but the real problem ran deeper than one bad decision. Years later, researchers at INSEAD, one of Europe's top business schools, spent years interviewing more than 70 Nokia executives and engineers, trying to solve a puzzle. How did this many smart people stay silent together? The answer is quietly devastating. It wasn't that nobody saw the danger. It was that the people who saw it were afraid to say it. Inside Nokia, a culture of fear had taken hold. Middle managers learned that delivering bad news upward could get you labeled a poor performer or quietly pushed aside. So layer by layer, everyone learned the same survival skill. Report the good, bury the bad. The top floor heard everything's on track, right up until the moment it wasn't. Meanwhile, the engineers were sinking into a different kind of quicksand. Nokia's operating system, Symbian, had been designed for keypad phones. The code was aging, and nearly every new phone model required the teams to rebuild and adapt it all over again. Steve Jobs had his engineers polishing one system. Nokia's engineers were serving dozens. From the outside, the world saw an empire. From the inside, it felt like a machine grinding harder and harder just to stay in place. February 2011. An internal memo leaks, and it shakes the entire industry. Nokia's newly appointed CEO, Stephen Elop, writes to all employees, "We are standing on a burning platform. Stay, and the fire consumes us. Jump, and we plunge into freezing water." He jumped, announcing that Nokia would abandon Symbian and bet everything on Microsoft's new system. You can understand the reasoning. But the decision triggered a fatal chain reaction. The new Microsoft phones were a year away from store shelves, and the old Symbian phones had just been declared dead by Nokia's own CEO. Consumers aren't fools. Who buys a phone that's already been given a death sentence? Sales fell off a cliff. 2 years later, in September 2013, Nokia announced it was selling its entire phone business to Microsoft. The price, $7.2 billion. To put that in perspective, at its peak, Nokia earned roughly that much in profit in a single year. At the press conference, the chairman stood on stage and said something that would echo for years. "We didn't do anything wrong," he said, "but somehow we lost. We didn't do anything wrong." That sentence deserves a moment of silence. There's a line in the I Ching, the ancient Chinese book of changes, written some 3,000 years ago. At the very top of the very first hexagram, it offers a warning in 4 characters. The dragon that flies too high will have cause for regret. Why? Because for the one at the very top, every direction leads down. And that was Nokia's tragedy. Take any single decision and examine it alone. None of them were wrong. Protecting your core business? Reasonable. Waiting for the market to prove itself? Prudent. But stack all those not wrongs on top of each other, and together they add up to one colossal wrong. What defeated Nokia was never really the iPhone. It was the position of being number one itself, a position that slowly turns caution into instinct and turns "stay hungry" into a poster on the wall. But this story has an ending that almost nobody knows. Nokia didn't die. After selling the phone business, it stepped back from the spotlight and rebuilt itself around telecommunications networks. Right now, many of the calls you make and the signals your phone connects to still run through Nokia equipment, humming away in the background of your life. And something even more unexpected happened to the thousands of engineers who walked out those doors. They scattered across Finland and founded hundreds of new companies. One of them was a tiny studio, barely a dozen people crammed into an office in Helsinki, working on a mobile game. The game was Clash of Clans. The company was Supercell. It went on to become one of the most profitable game makers on the planet, and when it was acquired in 2016, its valuation topped $10 billion. More than Microsoft paid for Nokia's entire phone business. Sit with that for a second. The empire sold the building, but the people the empire had trained built a new city right next to the ruins. So in the end, the story of Nokia is not a story about failure. It's about a cycle that none of us escape. In 1865, a paper mill on a riverbank could never have imagined it would one day make telephones. The king of mobile phones could never have imagined it would one day retreat behind the curtain. And the engineers who were forced to leave could never have imagined that the best work of their lives would begin after the goodbye. The thing that made you win, if you grip it too tightly, becomes the thing that makes you lose. But that sentence has a second half. The thing that made you lose, if you can let it go, becomes the thing that lets you win again. Nokia let go of paper. It let go of rubber boots. And in the end, it let go of phones. Every one of its rebirths came not from holding on, but from daring to hand something over. So the next time you find yourself standing on top of something, clutching a playbook that has never failed you, think of that factory by the river in Finland. The real question was never, will I lose this? Open corner bracket. The real question is, when that day comes, can you do what it did and turn an ending into another beginning?